Welcome to the How to Podcast series. My name is Dave. Happy to have you here. Let's get into the conversation today around podcasting. Let's help you start your show and grow your podcast. Everybody, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. If you ever go to any type of podcasting event, if you ever talk to anybody about podcasting and the name Rob Greenlee comes up, you know you're in the right spot, because people who talk about Rob Greenlee, who have met Rob Greenlee, who have listened to Rob Greenlee, watched Rob Greenlee, you've learned a lot about podcasting, and as a gentleman continues to show up, add great value to the podcasting community. His heart is for the creators in podcasting. He understands the business from all different angles. And for me, as a listener and viewer of all things Rob Greenlee, I learned so much on a regular basis from this gentleman. And to have a few moments with him today is a joy for me and a thrill. So Rob Greenlee, welcome to the How to Podcast series. I'm so glad to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Dave. Thanks for inviting me to join you to talk to your community of podcasters and creators. It's a very interesting time.
It is a very interesting time, and I've been following along with you and your good buddy Todd and all of the things you've been doing in the past for podcasting, and hearing the evolution of podcasting and seeing the impact of AI and video and all kinds of stuff happening in podcasting. What I love about your approach, Rob, is you're not afraid to try new things. You're not
Right.
afraid to be a little bit adventurous sometimes. Sometimes there's a response in the adventure from others, but you're not bothered by that. You're out there to find the best path forward for us as podcasters, and that's why I'm excited to have you on the show.
Yeah, and that's how I got into all this too, was that kind of explorational kind of view on everything that I was working on. You know, I come from a background around kind of marketing, more traditional marketing. So that's kind of how I've always looked at things, is, you know, trying to reach audiences, reach customers. To me, that's kind of one and the same thing. And that's kind of what this medium has meant to me over the years, was more of a direct relationship with people via content. So, you know, this exploration of new ways of doing that has been just part of my 20 plus year journey in this, because that's my curiosity around how things work and how things change and evolve with technology, and kind of the social aspect of this is so important now too.
When you go to podcasting events as a speaker on stage, we see that right on your website, you as a panel discussion at these meetings and these conventions and meetups and stuff. How has your messaging changed over the years, Rob, as a speaker on stage, as you kind of review and look back at some of the opportunities you've had in the past? How has your
Yeah,
message kind of been tweaking and evolving over time?
I don't know that it's, I mean, if I really think about it, I'm not sure that it's evolved dramatically. I think the creator kind of focus, or back in those days, it was really more about educating people about podcasting. And, you know, now it's not so much about educating people about what is a podcast, even though that topic has come up here recently, again, for probably the 10th time in my career that people start raising this question. Well, you know, what is a podcast, and what is its definition? Is it a technical definition of online media, or is it a content definition? And that's been the eternal struggle. And then this whole download versus streaming
Right.
conversation has also been, I guess, top of mind in the progression of this medium, because when I started doing a lot of this, everything was pretty much streaming. Um, and but streaming was done for different reasons in the early years than it is now. Uh, Streaming of content online, whether it be video or audio, was done because the consumer side of things had very limited bandwidth. So we were trickling information out to them, or trickling data out to them, or trickling media out to them in a format and in a flow that was compatible with their internet connection. So that's a big part of things that have changed for me as I've been thinking about this medium, is that now, we all just take for granted how much internet speed we have. And now the conversation is starting to shift back to streaming again, but it's shifting back towards streaming for a different reason. It's more around convenience.
Right.
And it's also secondarily more about um, metrics and understanding how much is being consumed, where it's being consumed, what areas of the content are being consumed. That's a big thing that's changed as well. Because when I started, people weren't really too concerned about that. It was more like, like hits with websites, right? Uh,
Right.
there was a sign of life. That's what everybody was focused on. Now it's more in depth. So, I think as we look at this medium and how it's growing and developing, is that there's business interests that have been really driving improvements and upgrades to content experiences and delivery. And I think this term podcast is increasingly being referenced from two perspectives, one from the audience perspective and one from the creator technology perspective. And sometimes those definitions blend together. And when that happens, it creates conflict
Right.
because people see things through their own lens. And that's what I've been always battling, is this understanding that from an audience perspective, they see something different than what the technical side or the content creator should be looking at. And having an understanding of that difference is really key to really understanding what's happening in the medium.
I understand it from a marketing sense. If somebody's going to put dollars into our podcast
Yeah,
and support us financially by adding ads and sponsorship deals into our show, you have to have a definition so that you can measure it, right? You can't
yeah,
have 10 different measurement opportunities and ways of measuring something and have a really valid number at the end of the day. So I
yeah,
understand that side of why we need to define
yeah.
what a podcast is in an
But
ever changing,
unfortunately, that's
right?
that's where we've been at
Yeah.
for pretty much the whole life of this medium, is in a very, like I say, how can I say this, a very undefined kind of metrics or measurement standards. People in this industry have competed against each other around who has better metrics. And, and the definition of better metrics is defined by what your business model is. And that's the troubling part about it, is that metrics hasn't been used as a way to bring people together. It's been a way to create a competitive landscape. And that has further enhanced this issue of, you know, having a having a medium that is very confusing around audiences and consumption patterns and things like that. That's made it difficult for advertisers and people to get involved in this medium, because they don't, who do they trust? I mean, what number is the right number, and is the best number the lowest number, right? Because if you're looking at this from a business perspective, the best number is not the lowest number, even
Right.
though it might be the most accurate number. But it's also had this undertow of, be careful what you wish for. If you want deep metrics and you want it to be extremely accurate, you also may have less of a business opportunity too. So there's this tension that's been in the medium for many years that I've been in the middle of, that has really been a struggle, and it's caused a lot of people to either be sued or accused of fraud, or accused of undermining the economics of this medium.
The other side then is the people who come into podcasting out of sheer hobby, no
Mhm.
desire to make money with their show.
Correct.
10 listeners, it would be amazing.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. If I had 10 people listen to my show, I'd be thrilled,
Yeah.
Rob. And they
Yeah.
come into this space and then they go to a conference, they listen to podcasts about podcasting, and they're hearing another side of podcasting, which they feel maybe a little inadequate or in the wrong place because
Yeah.
I'm not looking at 100,000 downloads. I'm looking for 10, and I'm
Right.
happy with 10. So I'm trying to balance out, as I talk on this show with podcasters, where the entry point is for somebody in that situation where they're looking for 10 listens and they're happy. And then there's also balancing it out with people that are building a business around this and looking for sponsors. It's almost like two different groups of people. And if you put
Mhm.
these people into one room at a conference, it becomes more evident where these groups lie, where there's the groups that are just looking at a sheer love for hobby podcasting. That's all they want compared to the business side of podcasting. I think these conferences actually put a spotlight on this kind of
Yeah.
this difference between kind of different approaches into podcasting.
Yeah, I think that's always been there. I think when podcasting started, it was a love of the medium, or a medium for big egos, right? That were just, felt like they had to be on the microphone and they had a lot to say and they were very good communicators to some degree. And then there was the other end of the spectrum, which were basically a bunch of creators that were geeks, because in the early years, and I hold my hand up to to confirm my involvement in this medium was really more from a technology perspective,
Yeah,
and playing around with technology and trying to do something innovative and do something different with technology in the early years. I mean, the whole radio show that I had was all about the growth and development of the internet and online connections and all this kind of stuff. And what the future looked like. So I was very much into the technical aspects of it. When I started, I had to have all my own servers, my own infrastructure. I had co-located servers in a couple different co-location facilities to facilitate my own podcast and
right.
my own streaming show. And because the infrastructure wasn't built yet, that was prior to Libsyn even existing.
Yeah,
So you really didn't have any other options. So back when I got started in all this, you had to be a geek. And so that's also a dividing line that has happened, I think, over the last few years too, is some of the early podcasters were male, they were geeks, and there's been some pushback in the industry over the subsequent few years around, podcasting is an old white male medium, and
right,
we have to make it more diverse, and we got to get more, women involved, and it's been an exclusionary medium where somehow all of us white guys have been excluding all these other underrepresented
right.
people out there from the medium, and that couldn't be any further from the truth. I mean anybody could join the medium. It's just back in the early days, it wasn't a diverse medium because there wasn't an interest on the part of
Yeah,
those cultures and those people out there to get involved in this.
right.
And so it progressed gradually over the years, and now we're seeing a lot of women involved and a lot of diversity, and as we've seen the medium grow globally, that's not an issue anymore. But that happened because we took technology out of the process and made it easier for people to not have to worry too much about technology to be a podcaster.
It's interesting that people are still wrestling with the term of what is a podcast today. And I'm curious,
Well,
Rob, from
well, it's
your
because of
perspective,
video, really.
because of video, yeah. Do
Right.
you consider a definition of podcast being a content, a delivery, or how it's received, or a combination of the three?
Well, this gets back to what I was saying just a few minutes ago was, I think it depends on who you're talking about.
Okay,
If you're talking about audiences, they see what looks and sounds like a podcast as a podcast. They don't really care about the technical definitions of
right.
anything.
Yeah,
Um, RSS is kind of completely off the table for most consumers of online content now.
yeah,
But podcasters still need to know what it is. Even today, there's a lot of podcasters that don't know what an RSS feed is,
right,
because we've been successful in taking it out of the consciousness of needing to know what an RSS feed is to some degree, because of the struggle that a lot of the platforms have had in educating people about what it is. So let's just, disappear it and handle it
Yeah.
on the back end to let the servers talk to servers, and all the humans need to do is push a button, and
Yeah.
there's no issue with that. Though there is the professional side of podcasting, which hasn't really embraced that necessarily. They've if you want to be a real professional, successful, large scale podcaster, y- the the major platforms out there are not automating that RSS stuff. It's really an interesting dynamic that's going on. Is that on the consumer end of podcasting, those that are catering to the hobbyists and whatever, they've really dug deep into really helping that podcaster make it as easy as possible. Get the RSS, push a button, it submits it to Spotify or to Apple or whatever. But if you look at the professional platforms, they they say if you're going to be on our platform, you're going to have to cut and paste that RSS feed
Yeah.
and manually submit it to all these platforms. Um, so it's an interesting twist on this. I would have thought that the professional side would have automated this RSS focus and taken it completely out of the mix, but that only seems to have happened on the consumer side. So on the not the consumer of the content, but the consumer side of being a podcaster, right? So if you're a
Yeah.
hobbyist or whatever, and not as concerned about monetization, they've stripped out a lot of the technical knowledge needs and being able to understand what an RSS feed is.
It's interesting because I'll hear people say, well, I posted a short little clip of my 45-minute episode on TikTok. It's 40 seconds long. And somebody said, that's how I consume your podcast. I never listen to the 45-minute episode. I only listen to what's on TikTok.
Yeah,
So in that moment, you can either push back and go, well, that's not my podcast. That's a clip from my podcast. But what if that's how that audience is best served?
yeah,
And wouldn't you consider that? I know keeping the metrics out for ads, just as a pure conversation about podcasting, wouldn't you be okay with the fact that somebody found your content
yeah.
and
Well,
enjoyed it, even on that
yeah.
small little taste of it? Right.
Well, I mean, it's if you look at it from a content perspective, it is a clip from your podcast.
Yeah.
So, and those shorts platforms are almost like a separate medium to some degree. People will go in there and just consume there. That doesn't mean that they're going to consume it and then immediately go over to your long form content and consume it over there. So, you kind of have to treat these things as independent platforms from each other. But the content that you're creating, I mean, I do this all the time with the shows that I do. I publish shorts out from them too. It's a short from my podcast. So, do I call it a podcast when it's in the short form? Yeah, I think it's a clip from my podcast. So
Right.
it's got its own little definition. But yeah, I think, and if you do a show that looks and sounds like a podcast like we are right now,
Right.
that's only available on YouTube, I think the definition of what a podcast is comes into play too, because it looks and sounds like it's a podcast. We're talking into microphones, we're having a conversation, and that's what most people understand a podcast to be. So, I'm not going to argue with the consumer of this on this and say,
Right.
well, it didn't have an RSS feed because, so
Yeah.
it's not a podcast, it's a YouTube video.
Right.
Well, it can be both.
Yeah. Yeah, the last thing you're gonna do is try to convince somebody on the receiving end of what they think a podcast is,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think
But
at
that's
the
what the
same
industry
time,
has thought
yeah,
that they need to do is we need to do a got milk campaign to convince everybody that you know that there's podcasting is this and it's not that. So and I go that's a waste of time. Yeah.
this whole medium of podcasting is evolving and changing, and the fact that the definition's getting broader and
Yeah.
more people are coming into the space with their own opinions of what a podcast is. I'm hearing podcasts about podcasting going into like a really deep conversation around this topic, trying to define podcasting from many different perspectives. And what's interesting is not everybody always agrees, Rob, but we all kind of come together in some way and we find some common ground as
Yeah.
creators around what this medium is and what it can be. And I think that's the other part is what I love about what you're doing, Rob, is you're you're testing the limits. You're working on what's out there right now. You're thinking about what's coming in the future. You're not just focused on podcasting as we know it right now. You're focusing more on what it could be and this kind of blended version of how we show up as podcasters. Can you talk a little bit more about your kind of your strategy around that?
Yeah, I mean, it's always evolving. So it's never a static opinion that I've had, and it's always been that way for the 20 years that I've been in this medium because it's not a podcasting in my view has really not been any kind of a revolution. It's been more of a evolution. And so as we've journeyed through this, consumer behavior and creator behavior kind of evolves over time, and it's always reflected technological innovation. It's always flowed along that path. So, like a big inflection point, just to give an example, was the announcement on Apple's part of the iPhone.
Right.
That was a huge inflection point for podcasting, and that was because of a technological innovation. And so, that's why I've really kind of um, honed my attention to looking at what's happening with AI. Um, but I've also honed my attention to it to the point where it's like, okay, I've played with this, I've seen how it works, but I'm also a little skeptical of its impact, right? And the impact may not be what we maybe thought it would have been maybe a year ago, or less. I think the impact of AI right now is somewhat convoluted. I don't know that there's a lot of people in the podcasting, especially in the audio side, that are really doing a lot with AI beyond just helping them with some pre-production work and post-production work. There's some editing being done in like the Descript platform, but oftentimes that has to be, I guess, kind of toned down a little bit. Also, it can be a little bit, disruptive to the flow of it. And I think humans, and I'm increasingly feeling this way, human created, especially audio content, is going to still dominate. I don't see AI and their cloning technology of voice and stuff like that really playing a huge role as I look to the future. It's going to have a huge role in ad creative. I think that this merger between uh, programmatic advertising, means programmatic, if you don't know what it means, is kind of like automatic advertising in your podcast,
Right.
where there's insertion points and the servers insert ads automatically. You don't have to sell anything; it just happens. Um, I think the creative side of creating the ads is going to happen more in AI technology. I think that's where it's going to happen first. And then there will be a little bit of blending of people trying to use AI voice cloning to create content, and then also uh, transcription type things in creating different language versions of your show. I think that we are definitely in the process of seeing that happen. And it's happening on YouTube right now too, where an English spoken podcast will be translated into pretty much every language on earth now automatically on the back end. So you
Right.
won't have to do that yourself. But I'm increasingly hearing podcasters, because I've been asked this question many times. Well, what's the best way to create a Spanish version of my show, right? And so I think that's where kind of that AI technology of sorts and cloning could help with. So those are the innovations that are happening, but the actual creation of the content itself, I think, is still going to be pretty dominated by humans.
Okay. Yeah, and I can see that here in Canada. We have French and English, the two official languages in Canada. So predominantly
Yeah,
a lot of podcasts in
yeah,
Canada are English speaking. So there's
yeah,
a great opportunity to reach more of a
and
French audience
French
here
too,
in
right?
Canada,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, that's a great opportunity. I think all these tools in AI, they're showing up everywhere. Like I use Canva, I use a bunch of different places.
yeah,
It's just everywhere. It's kind of blending its way into our everyday tasks and things that we do. Just it's making things a
yeah.
lot easier.
Yeah,
And you
it's
know, go
brings.
effective. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's bringing some efficiencies. It's speeding things up, but I increasingly find myself really kind of having to really human edit pretty much everything. If I take it just out of the output, there's something missing
Yeah.
almost every time. And I feel a little bit uncomfortable just using output um, in any kind of human communication, without doing any kind of editing to it. I'm, I don't know if it's just because AI kind of speaks in its own kind of language cadence and its
Hmm.
own kind of,
Yeah.
it pumps out content that's kind of generic and maybe overly positive, that feels a
Yeah.
little un or inauthentic might be a good way of saying it.
Yeah.
It feels a little bit too flowery at times, and I that's not how I speak. So it's not going, somebody that would read something that I wrote and then read something that AI wrote, would have a completely different experience.
I heard that when you had your guest co-host AI on your show. It's
Yeah.
like very, very, he was very kind to you as the host.
Right.
He didn't argue. He didn't have what about this, Rob? He didn't have that.
Yeah.
It was a very different from you and Todd because I
Yeah.
loved the
Right.
dynamic between the two of you. That's really fun to listen to that. It was a
Yeah, and I
very
think it's a
different
good
experience, right?
example
Yeah.
of that dynamic is that AI is there's something missing there, and that
Yeah.
what's missing there is that human uh, emotion, right? The fluctuation in the human emotion and
Hmm.
inflection. I mean, AI can speak very concisely, can have a lot of depth of information, but I think like I said in my last episode is that he's almost like having a color commentator in a sports event, right? So you have the lead host and then you have a color commentator that has all of the stats on all the players, right?
Right.
And it can add that layer to this. So AI is really kind of like a data source for me. So that increasingly that's kind of how we just have to treat it. We can't expect it to be like a real human co-host. So, right.
Where do you think AI should be today? You were kind of mentioning to me earlier that AI doesn't really seem to be at the spot you thought it might be, and a little disappointed possibly that it could be better. Where were you anticipating AI would be today as you kind of watch AI
Well, I
develop?
guess when AI started to roll out, I guess I had this perception that it was something more than it is. And I think I've learned here that that's maybe a little inaccurate. I think a lot of what's happening with the AI stuff right now is that there's been a lot of hype around it, right? There's also been a lot of kind of doomsaying and things like that. And I saw this happen with the internet in the early years too. And that's kind of why I'm kind of pivoting a little bit on this because I I saw what would happen. This is probably 10 plus years ago when everybody was talking about what's called machine learning.
Right.
And that, I believe, was the early, kind of process that we see today in AI. Is that this is just a more advanced machine learning process. I wouldn't even say it's artificial intelligence. I would say it's more computers are still learning, and everything that these computers are learning is coming from humans. Because we haven't reached the stage where these servers or these computers can go out and kind of obtain their own independent data, right? I
Right.
think that's the next stage because, like all of us, I mean, okay, if you apply this lens to humans and how humans gather information, I'm increasingly thinking of myself as kind of like an HI, human intelligence, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
each one of us are almost like our own independent LLM, right?
Yeah.
So we gather information, we synthesize it, we learn from it. This is what's being attempted to be replicated with these AI models, but I don't think it's anywhere near the capability of humans to do that same process. So I'm still thinking that AI is really still in the stage of machine learning. and it's still learning from the world. It's like a toddler that hasn't really, reached, its teens yet, right?
Okay.
So it doesn't really know much about the world yet. It's still kind of gathering information that humans are feeding it, right? So humans are actually feeding and helping this computer, this algorithm, this neural network learn. So we're basically, we're interacting with like maybe an 8-year-old right now,
Yeah.
if you want to think about it from that perspective.
Okay.
And until we reach like maybe 25-year-old stage, that's when it will start having a impact. I don't know how long that's going to take is the question. And where is it going to get its information from? Because eventually it's going to suck up everything that it can get its hands on right now. But then for it to really be super intelligent, it's going to have its own information sources that are goes beyond human experience, right?
Right.
So it can start, solving the big problems of our reality, right? Start coming up with, energy sources that we had never known about before or whatever. It's going to have to go out and do its own data gathering. And that's the part I'm a little bit concerned about. What does that look like?
Yeah. The one thing I do like about the AI is the connectivity, where if you put it in a medical sense, you'd have a doctor in Toronto, Canada, a doctor in California, and a doctor in Mexico, all working on the same project. They don't know each other, but
Yeah,
their research combined together could come up with an answer faster than any one of those three on their own.
that's
I
true.
like that connectivity idea of the
Yeah,
large language models and how they work together.
yeah,
So that could create some answers too.
yeah. Yeah, I think if you get enough information together, you can start to see patterns. And I think that's the stage that we're at right now, is that they're gathering all sorts of stuff. But I have heard here recently that a lot of the big AI models have been outsourcing uh, what they call tagging um, to people that live in other countries and paying them very kind of like slave
Mm,
wages or whatever
yeah,
to look at videos and to tag things, right? As, you know, that picture that I'm looking at is a dog,
right,
and tagging it with what it is, right? So we're still at the stage where these models are still learning what's in the world, right? And what comprises the world. And if I look at what like Tesla's doing with their self-driving cars, and I look at the screen that I have in my car, it doesn't have much detail about the world around it, right? It's
right,
still a little hazy and foggy, so it doesn't have a lot of depth information about the reality of the world. And I just keep thinking to myself, well, at some point, it's going to need to know all that information. How's it going to gather all that? So so it can have the proper context that humans have, right? When we open our eyes, we see the world for what we can see, right? There's a lot in our world that is there that we can't see because our eyes were designed to only see a certain frequency of light. So there's other things in our world that AI is going to be able to see and experience that humans aren't. So that's the part that I'm increasingly thinking that that's when we'll start seeing real revolution in what the AI is capable of doing, is when it starts to see things beyond what humans can experience and see.
right. For podcasters, Rob, who are in the space, maybe they've been in podcasting for quite a while. They've had an audio podcast and it's doing well. And then there's a lot of talk around video. And I know you've talked about this many times
Yep.
with Todd and other places. I'm playing with video too. I'm trying to figure it out myself. Is there is there a good starting point for a podcaster in concern around video and kind of like where a good on ramp would be for a new creator into video?
Yeah, I'm increasingly thinking that the best thing, and I've experienced this myself, is just doing video on my iPhone. As a great place to get started. And it doesn't have to be the same content that you're doing with your podcast. It can
Right.
just be, you pulling your phone up and doing a vertical video and pushing it out to, a couple of the the shorts platforms that are out there, whether it be YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or any of these platforms, and just pushing it out and start building your personal brand. Drive a message that's related to maybe the topic of your podcast, but make it different content. But if you do record video as part of your production process of your podcast, which is what I'm doing, then you can cut it up, right? And you can take snippets from it. So you just have to make a choice. Do I want to just keep doing my audio and then just kind of work my way into doing more video as I feel comfortable doing it, and just use the tools you have today, or go all in and start creating your podcast like on a StreamYard or Riverside type of a platform where you're
Right.
able to capture the audio and video, and then use like an Opus Clips or something like that to snip it out, a half dozen kind of 30 to 3 minute, um, 30-second to 3-minute clips from it, and
Yeah.
push those out to the platforms. I mean, a lot of these platforms can help you automate the publishing side as well. So, that would be another way of doing it. So it just depends on where you want to start. If you want to start audio only, then just kind of phase into the shorts. But if you want to do audio and video simultaneously, then that gives you more options.
Interesting. I did start off with the RSS ingestion into YouTube. And what I started out, well, I just treated YouTube as a backup storage drive
Right.
because
That's
I have
actually a
so
good
much.
idea,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's archiving everything. It's free to connect. I don't really have a YouTube strategy when I first started, Rob, I got to confess, but I'm seeing that even when an RSS fed audio podcast shows up on YouTube, I've been sitting there on YouTube creating a thumbnail for it as it goes live, and somebody jumps in my comments while I'm sitting there on YouTube. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to respond to this person.
Right.
And now
Oh,
we're
yeah.
having
And you
conversations
should
on YouTube,
always.
right?
Right.
And now YouTube's going, this is good. And one
Yeah.
of my shows is called Living the Next Chapter. It's an author podcast. And I use YouTube as a advanced listen because I'm recording in the future right now.
Ah.
And my guests have to wait 2, 3 months to get their episode. So I put it up on YouTube right away and give them the link so they can have it because it's the recency of the interview and they want to share it.
Yeah.
And they might forget about me in 2 months. So I give them that, and it's an advanced listen for my guests. My audio version of my podcast on For Living the Next Chapter, RSS fed into YouTube, no video. I just went over 2,000 watch hours for an audio only podcast. And I'm
That's
like,
great.
again, it wasn't my intention to have a YouTube strategy, but now that I'm seeing YouTube giving me great results for my podcast, I'm like, I better listen to Rob. I better start going down this path of considering what I can do to get onto this highway called video. So that's kind of what my path has been. So I'm really curious, picking your brain and hearing you talk about it, how I can baby step my way into this traffic called video, because I think there's a good upside there as well, I think.
Yeah, it's the number one kind of content search engine. So, it's always going to be a good place to be where people, and it's always been a mantra in the podcasting space is y as a creator, you have to go to where there's the biggest potential audience. And for many years, that was Apple Podcasts or iTunes,
Yeah,
was where the vast majority of the audience was, and it's the same kind of thought process. A lot of what's going on with YouTube is and people's talking down about it is that they're fearful of the power of a platform that isn't audio, and
right.
that is seen by some as a threat to what was built primarily as an audio platform, known as podcasting. But the truth of the matter is, and I've said this many times, is that podcasting has always been an audio and video medium.
Right,
And one of the reasons that it wasn't seen that way was because of YouTube.
right.
So because YouTube came in at almost the same time when podcasting started, and podcasting had a bunch of video creators that were publishing video into their RSS feeds, just like
Yeah,
that they were doing with audio, like I do with two shows right
right.
now. You can, if you don't know this, you can watch video, you can get video in Apple Podcasts today. The problem is that Apple has depreciated the video side.
Right.
And there's been a few people in the industry that have been putting pressure on Apple to make it a, a first party or a first principled experience back in their app again because they took it out. The actual kind of ability to throttle between audio and video podcasts right in the interface. Right now, you're hard pressed to find the video in Apple Podcasts because
Yeah.
they've really positioned it to be an audio first platform. But all they have to do is make a UI adjustment, and we're in a different era of coming back with video podcasting on Apple Podcasts, and that's going to, I know Todd is pretty much in favor of this too. Once that happens, that changes this whole conversation,
Yeah.
right?
Watch everybody change gears really quickly as soon as that happens. Right.
Yeah. It's just, is it going to happen? Is
Yeah.
Apple going to take the suggestion and do it? Sometimes there's a significant time lag on their part of making shifts like that.
But historically for Apple, when they do decide to go in on something, they're pretty committed to it. So
Yeah, and it usually is their idea. It's
yeah.
usually not
Yeah.
doesn't come from anybody else.
Right.
But I've tried to have influence on those guys for many years to help them, take a path or not, or make suggestions, whatever. And sometimes they've adapted and made those changes, but they've been pretty quiet for many years now. I think it's time for them to step up and take their leadership position back again.
Yeah.
Um, I think they've been advocating that for a few years, and they've let Spotify over here and YouTube over here kind of disrupt things. When Apple has a lot more power than I think they give themselves credit for in how they can shape this industry and make it stronger again.
How would you say we as podcasters can lean into our HI, or human intelligence, for our podcast and share stories, be a human on video, on microphone for our audience, our community? How can we make ourselves different from all the AI stuff that's coming out right now and lean into our HI? Rob, if you could instruct us
Yep.
from the stage, from your point of view, for a new podcaster, how can we lean into who we are to make our show stand out?
Well, I think the big thing I'm thinking about on that topic is really thinking of yourself from the standpoint of whatever you're doing, trying to position it to make a difference in the world. I think this concept of mission-based podcasting and change advocacy or improvement advocacy has really been an important genre of sorts. I don't know if it's a genre, but it's a mindset, right? Of humans trying to help humans and humans connecting with other humans is going to be our superpower as we look to the future. It's not going to be, AI is just always going to be a companion to what we do. And I do think podcasting will be that medium or that area that's going to be human dominated. And humans consume podcasts. At this point, I I do know that AIs consume podcasts, but it's being consumed for different reasons. So it's not like, an AI is going to come in and listen to it once and then leave. Humans are going to come in and consume your content on a weekly, daily, regular cadence. And there's going to be a human interaction, human kind of relationship there that is built that will not happen with AI. And so, can AI supplement that and help with that? Maybe. I don't know that we've seen a clear path on how AI can help build community or whatever without being seen as manipulative of sorts. So, yeah, I think the human part of it is still going to be strong and still going to dominate. So really lean into your humanness. And I think flaws, at some point the AI editing tools will have this filter. I've seen this a little bit already in the Descript tool, where they've got this kind of editing. It's like an intensity setting of sorts,
Right.
or they've tried to taper back a little bit of the heavy editing that was being done like 6 months ago in that tool, where they've kind of pulled it back, or they've taken the audio editing and blended it with the video, where they will actually edit the audio without editing the video.
Mm.
So there'll be little snippets of video experience in there that will have the guests or the host moving their mouth, but there won't be any audio that's heard, as its method for not having as many kind of jump cuts in the video,
Yeah.
because they were editing the same with the audio with the video. And I think what they found is that if they adjust that and only take the audio out, but don't edit the video as much, it creates a smoother experience. But it does
Yeah.
create some awkward moments at times. So there's no perfect solution here.
So if you're to create a brand new show this week, Rob, you're going to start net new, 0 listeners. You'll get a lot of listeners right away because it's Rob Greenlee, but you're going to start a brand new show. What would be your approach to a brand new piece of content you're going to put into the world? Where would you start?
Well, I'm actually in the process right now of creating a whole new show.
There you go.
And I'm trying to be very purposeful about it, and trying to be very intentional about how I put it together and all the pieces and what the experience is. And I'm finding it to be a complex process. I mean, because I want it to be a a very successful show. I want it to be, at the level that I had with my radio show when I started it 20 plus years ago, 25 years ago.
Well,
Um, I I would like it to be at that same kind of level again, but so how I start now is very much intentional around, I'm concerned about, well, what's the reason for the show? What's my mission for the show? What am I trying to do to help the listener? What is the information that I'm sharing? What is the guest flow? How does my human experience that's expressed in the show match up with my guest experience? That's additive to the show, not primary. So I'm probably never going to do interviews where the interviews or the guests are primary in the show. I'm thinking that that is maybe what I did in the early years with my radio show, but I'm not sure that's what the audiences want now.
hmm,
So trying to, and then build in, ways that I can get audiences to give me feedback on the show, and so I
yeah,
can iterate and improve rapidly, and then also have a deeper knowledge of who my audience is, and really get information about what they want to know about and what they want to learn, and have that feedback process be constant. I don't think it's an easy thing to solve. I think a lot of podcasters struggle to get audience interaction and engagement and feedback processes, but I really want to solve that problem. And I've been doing these live shows, which I think
right,
have been really great on that side. You know, the earlier versions of the show that I did when I was under contract with StreamYard was a good kind of learning thing for me. I saw a lot of audience interaction when I was on the StreamYard channels. Of course, they had, 100 plus thousand subscribers to their channel,
right,
which puts things at a different scale. So scale is a big factor when it comes to interactivity. So you have to get scale before you can really turn on a lot of the necessary things that you need to be successful now, and to really have that, whether it be monetization, audience interaction, evolve the show and what your messaging is. Because if you don't have that, then all of it's coming from me, right? And what I want, what my interests are, which is only is going to get you so far. So that's why we're seeing that the the really big podcasts really kind of grow faster than new podcasts is because they've got that momentum already around audience interaction and audience connection that is able to propel them. Plus, they're able to build teams around their shows because there's a monetary benefit to them that isn't available to new podcasters today. So, as a new creator, you're at a disadvantage in pretty much every aspect. So you have to struggle through that phase as quickly as possible if you want to get to where I want to get with my show.
Yeah.
And there may only be really one way to do that, and it's basically investing money in running advertising about your show and treating it like a regular business. I mean, if you want to grow that type of a show, I think that's what it takes now.
Yeah. And that live streaming is another component on top of everything that some people are
Correct.
going to be really good at it at the beginning. Some people are going to take some time to practice because you got all these moving pieces at the same time, right? The chat and your guest, if you have a guest, and the content, and there's all
Yep.
these moving things you got to keep your hands on at all times.
Yeah, I really like the live stuff, but I also understand its limitations too.
Yeah.
There's production limitations that exist in that, and being able to effectively manage that experience at a high level is and host the show at the same time. I mean, I've done some consulting contracts where I've managed shows as a producer on the back end for these live shows, and it really helps it be better shows versus having the host of the show or one of the co-hosts manage the show while they're doing the show. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. It's excellent. So, Rob, thank you so much for making time to be on the How to Podcast series. I really appreciate you. And again, just to take the opportunity to say thank you because you continue to show up. You continue to give great value to podcasters, whether it's on stage at a conference, on all the different podcasts that you're on as a host, a co-host, as a guest. You just keep giving and giving and giving. And always been interested in following your career and where Rob ends up next. And I'm excited to hear about your new show. Can you tell us more about kind of when this show's scheduled to launch and kind of where you're at?
Well, I'm shooting for sometime in this month in July.
Okay.
So I've got some guests booked and I'm pulling the website together, and I've got the hosting platform already built, and so it's just a matter of getting all of the social posts or the social platforms built out, and then really focused on trying to create a couple of episodes, and I can get it off the ground, and we'll see where it goes from there, and how much I can invest into it to have it grow quickly. And is it going to have the value to the audience that will enable it to grow quickly? That's probably my most difficult task.
Right.
Is understanding what the audience wants and needs and what the potential is there. Is the idea of this show a spoken human? Is it a good idea in the market today? It depends on how I position it in the market, and it could turn people off. It could also, expand people's perceptions. It's kind of the same thing like I did with my radio show, is that I was playing in a controversial bath of water, and it doesn't always go smoothly.
I'm excited for it. We can also find more information at robgreenlee.com. We can head there. There's a lot of great information about you and where you are and what's up next. And so we can follow your journey there as well. Again, Rob, thank you so much for your time today. I really do appreciate all that you do for podcasters.
All right. Well, thank you, Dave. I appreciate your attention to this medium too. You're trying to help people just like I am. So I think it's great. Thank you.
Excellent. Everyone, all information for Rob in the show notes. Go listen to his new show, watch his new show when it comes out, and be a part of the community. And if you can catch Rob live on one of his shows, drop in the comments. He loves to read your comments and thoughts in real time on the show. It adds another whole level to what he does. So jump in those comments. I know he'd love to hear from you. Thanks, Rob.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks for checking out the video version of the How to Podcast series. You can always hear us everywhere. howtopodcast.ca. Come check us out. I'd love to talk to you soon. Thanks for being here.